Hello everyone, I'm Pathfinder, and this is going to be my first ever YouTube video. I've been playing tabletops for a while now, almost 9 years, and over the past few years I have fallen in love with Pathfinder. I love the game and the stories it lets me tell, and I love the mechanics and tactics behind all of it. But most of all, I love the community. I have found this community incredibly helpful when I was learning my own way around the game, and I'd love to share everything that I've learned over the past few years with y'all. Today I want to talk about a topic in this game that is near and dear to my heart: spells, spellcasters, and how best to make use of them. Aside from, of course, always spamming Fireball. In most conversations about spell selection that I see online, I see the same few spells get mentioned again and again. Fear, Heal, Fireball, Slow, Synesthesia, Haste, and others like them. I think that is a crime. I think the game is full of fantastic and powerful and flavorful spells, and only the same 10 or so get mentioned again and again. So this is the start of my video series explaining why such spells are good and when and how to use them best. So to start with, I'll be covering one of my favorite spells in this game, Hypnotize. I think this is one of the most criminally underrated spells in the game. It has performed fantastically for me. Let's go through the basics. It covers a 10-foot burst area, it targets will, but it doesn't really, and it has a duration that can be sustained up to a minute. If they fail that will save, the creature is fascinated, and fascinated is a bad condition, I agree, and therefore the spell is bad, right? No, because the spell does a lot more than fascinated. This spell inflicts dazzle on the creature within the cloud without offering them a saving throw. Auto effect spells in this game are rare. First rank has Force Barrage, and that's largely an exception. By the time you get to 5th rank, such spells become more common. Wall of Stone, for example, and all the other various walls. But at this rank, auto effect spells are rare, and auto effect spells that inflict such a powerful debuff on the foe are even rarer. Dazzled is a 1 in 5 chance that anything the opponent does that is a single target automatically misses, irrespective of their level relative to your whole party. What does that leave us with? How do you compare Hypnotize to another spell at this rank? I think the most comparable spell to Hypnotize at these ranks is actually Slow. So let's go through Slow real quick. Fortitude save. On a crit, nothing happens. On a success, the target loses 1 action. On a failure, the target loses 1 action for the rest of the fight. And on a crit fail, the target loses 2 actions for the rest of the fight. Why does this compare to Hypnotize? So think about it. Dazzled is a really strong debuff to inflict. The creature will want to move out of the Hypnotize to get out of the Dazzled, which means they'll lose 1 action getting out of the Dazzled. Then you will just stop sustaining the spell. I know Hypnotize is a sustained duration, but if the creature's moved out, there's no reason to sustain it. You just drop the spell. And you traded 2 actions for 1 action from that creature, just like the Slow spell. And Slow is a really good spell. However, I would still pick Slow over Hypnotize if I was just fighting a generic single target boss in a vacuum. Why is that? Because Slow has a worse floor, nothing can happen, but it has a much higher ceiling, where the boss might just lose the battle because of failing the saving throw. And that makes Slow worth casting, even though it has a lower floor than Hypnotize. So where does that leave Hypnotize? When is Hypnotize good to cast over Slow? And that is where we'll get into the topic of situational versus generically good spells. Generically good spells are the ones that are always worth casting. They're always worth bringing to the table. Heal is a great example. You can never really go wrong with having Heal in your toolkit. All of the options I listed before, those 10 or so spells that constantly get talked about, Synesthesia, Slow, Haste, they get talked about so much because they're generically good. But generically good does not mean they're the only good spells in the game. When something is situationally good, you have to evaluate, is it worth bringing in the situations it's good in? Future Pathfinder here. I said that situational spells should be evaluated in the situations they're good. Obviously, that's not the whole truth. They should be evaluated in situations they're good in, and weighted by how often such situations come up. you don't just evaluate a spell when it's at its best. You also evaluate a spell by how often it's at its best. If a spell is too situational, it's not a good spell. Fireball is the premier generically good AoE. If you're fighting 2 or more enemies, you always have a good reason to use it. But if you're fighting exactly 2 or 3 enemies in a very narrow corridor where it's impossible for them to get out of a straight line, Lightning Bolt is the better spell. Generic versus situational. Fireball is always good to have. Lightning Bolt works better when you're in a narrow corridor. It's the same thing for Hypnotize. In the situations where Hypnotize shines, it is a lot better than a lot of the other third rank spells. And the best way to get your best use out of it is to work with your party, prepare for the environment you'll be fighting in, and make good use of Hypnotize in those situations. So now I'll be covering some of the situations that Hypnotize can really shine in. And I do want to make it clear, I am not just theory crafting here. I have used Hypnotize a lot in my own play experiences, and the situations you see in this video are representative of what I've seen Hypnotize shine in during my own play experiences. So this is the first case. You're fighting a single boss, they're in a cramped room, and the cramped room has a easily blockable choke point that your marshals are able to occupy. In this case, a single door that enters this room, and the boss would have to tumble through 2 of them to get through to where you guys are standing. All you gotta do is cast Hypnotize, place the burst anywhere in the room, and the boss is just kind of screwed. They have nowhere they can really move in the room where they're not hypnotized, and it's really hard for them to get out of the room because of your 2 marshals blocking the door and them having to tumble through it. At this point, your job's kind of already done. All you did is cast 1 single spell, and this boss cannot really efficiently attack Valeros or Mauricio in this fight. They can't even get to the remaining 2 of you. Even if you just leave and just sustain Hypnotize from a distance, you've done a really impactful debuff for this fight, and your job here is done. Now for a slightly more complex situation than the one that I presented earlier. What if it's not a cramped dungeon? What if it is an open forest? Not every single adventure path is just abomination vaults after all. What do you do then? Are you just out of luck? Do you need a cramped space to use Hypnotize? No, you just need a little bit more party synergy. It's kind of the same principle as Slow, where if you cast Slow on a single boss, you're just denying them 1 action. But if your marshals coordinate with you, if they make sure to trip this person, now you might deny them more actions. So Ezrin throws up a Hypnotize over here, covers the jungle drake in it, then Valeros trips this drake. Now it's really expensive for this jungle drake to even try to get out of the Hypnotize. Maybe it'll just stay down on the floor and try to attack Valeros and Mauricio, not bother getting up, because if it gets up, it's going to eat a reaction from Valeros, and maybe even from Mauricio, depending on the way they're built. The drake will rather just stay on the ground, accept the debuff, and now you've committed to just keeping their attacks debuff for the rest of the fight. And if this drake, it just gets up and moves over here, you just drop the Hypnotize. You can just choose not to sustain it. So, as before, your floor became like the success effect of the slow spell, which is a really good floor to have. So even in an open space, as long as your party synergizes with you, you can usually get a nice, long-lasting effect from Hypnotize. Better than slow, arguably, because while the drake was sitting there inside the Hypnotize, if it chose not to move out of the Hypnotize, that debuff is powerful and completely free. It does not require any saving throw. Now for the final situation. What if you're fighting a group of enemies and one of the elites in the group is in a position where your party just doesn't like having them? For example, this Legion Archon over here. They're flying 30 feet above the ground, and Valeros and Mauricio aren't really able to switch to their backup weapons and just start attacking them because they're busy taking care of these 2 Hound Archons. Ezrin and Kyra, they're both spellcasters. They can just attack at range, but this is not the party's strongest suit right now. Ezrin can throw a 10-foot burst for the Hypnotize right here. The Legion Archon now has a choice. Do they wish to stay up there and keep harassing us with ranged attacks like they want to? Or do they spend some time moving out? If they do move out, that reduces their offensive output for a little bit, buying the rest of the party the time they need to kill these two Hound Archons, and then focus their attentions on the Legion Archons. If they stay inside the Hypnotize and keep attacking us, they're now accepting a 1 in 5 chance of all of those attacks missing. Either way, what you've done is traded your spell slot and a few of your actions to slow down one of the enemies. You're implementing a divide and conquer strategy. You're making it a lot easier for the rest of your party to take care of the more immediate threat, while you're able to delay the threat that they're not great at dealing at. And once the Legion Archon is outnumbered, it doesn't really matter whether they're up there or down below. Your party could probably defeat them just by outnumbering them 4-1 and switching to backup weapons. That is the third and final use case of Hypnotize that I wanted to go over, where you can use to get enemies out of situations that you don't like them to be in, into situations where you're happy fighting them. That covers all 3 situations that I had lined up for you guys. Now, of course, that's not to say those are the only 3 situations to use Hypnotize in. Hypnotize is a good spell in other situations too. For example, if there's a large group of enemies, just throw the Hypnotize in the middle of them. Many of them will miss a bunch of their attacks, another bunch of them will probably run out of it, it'll kind of feel like a mass slow. You will be able to make good use of the spell that way. These 3 situations were not exhaustive, they were just meant to get you to start thinking about when Hypnotize is good, how do I make my party work with me to make Hypnotize good? That'll be all for today's video. There will be more upcoming videos covering other spells that I find underrated, provided you guys really like this kind of content. So if you do, please like and subscribe. This is my first ever video, like I said, and the more positive feedback I get, the likelier I am to keep making these videos, and I really want to, so that'll be all for today.